Dawson's Rambles.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. This is going to be my video ranking all of the Disney era Power Rangers series, concluding this trilogy of Disney era related Power Rangers videos before we move on to the Saban Entertainment era. So let's go ahead and get started. I actually have visual aids for this one. I'm still not using pictures, but I found a loophole. We'll get to the loophole in a minute because the bottom pick does not have a picture. My least favorite Disney era wait, that makes no sense. My least favorite Disney era season, not Disney era Saban season, is the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers reversioning, remastering. I don't know if this one necessarily counts, but I felt like it should be at the bottom of the list because it technically was a Disney era season, technically the last one. I guess it is a Disney Saban season. See, I knew it all along. It was just weird. I mean, you take MMPR season 1, which in my opinion is one of the worst seasons in general. It's just nothing. And then you put weird effects in an attempt to make it like a C, exciting. And you have an accent, like, I don't know, it was not good. It was not. So I felt like that needed to be at the bottom of the list. Alright, next up on the list is, boom, visual aids. I have DVDs. This is how I'm going to do it for this one until we can start using pictures again. But Operation Overdrive, this is also why I wanted to put MMPR on the bottom spot, because this season gets so much heat. Like, this is one of my lesser favorite seasons that I feel like I'm always defending because I think that it's gotten this thing now where people are like, oh, this is the worst season ever, it's trash. I'm like, have you seen it? No, but like people told me it was bad. Again, this isn't one of my more favorites. Obviously it's my least favorite of the Disney era, but there's still things to enjoy about this season. The reason it's on the bottom of the list for me is that there was just something off about the cast that just, I don't even necessarily really dislike them as much as I do other characters in certain other seasons, but there was just something off about the team and the group dynamic for me, and a little bit something off about the narrative, and some of the dialogue and acting was a little bit more spotty than usual. I think that's my main reason why it's on the bottom of my list, or like near the bottom, is just because there was something off about it for me. But I think especially in the Neo Saban era where we had these phoned in seasons with terrible dialogue and stuff like that, in my opinion this does not deserve to be called the worst season of all time. It still had a really cool plot. I think they did a really good job of taking Bokenger's more episodic plot and stringing it together with the Corona Aurora. There was some neat character stuff. I liked the stuff with Mac. In my opinion, Spencer is the coolest, or one of the coolest, supporting characters of all time. I think there's a lot more to like about this season. I certainly don't think it deserves to be called the worst. Next up on the list is Power Rangers Jungle Fury. This is kind of weird ranking solo on this list because I'm a huge Geki Ranger fan. I love the suits. I absolutely adore Jungle Fury. Like, it's one of my most fond seasons, like, in my heart. But there is reasons the other ones rank a little bit above for me. I really love this season a lot. I adore the cast. I like the storyline. I think it's one of the most fun to rewatch. The theme song gets me absolutely pumped. You know how it is. The only reason that it ranks a little bit lower for me is I think near the middle, around the Jungle Masters arc, it's just a little clunky for me. Like, this was a really hard one to rank so low. Like, I wanted to rank it higher, but when I sort of objectively looked at some things, I just wasn't a fan of how they did some stuff around the Jungle Masters arc, and there were some clunky bits that bothered me a little bit to rank it down a little bit, but I still adore this season. Next up, I really personally don't count this as part of the Disney era, even though it technically is. I count Wild Force to be a Saban season, since it was basically that Saban style, but there's people that would probably get on my case for not calling it a Disney era season, so this is where I would rank it if it was in here, but this is like an unofficial pick, but this is where it would rank on the list. And I wanted to just talk about it for a second. Also, this is going to be on the Saban list as well, just FYI. Next up on the list is Power Rangers Ninja Storm. For me, I had a hard time deciding whether it was this one or Jungle Fury that would rank in this spot personally, or even the next spot. But this season, I mentioned Jungle Fury is one of my most favorites to rewatch. This is up there as well as one of my most favorites to rewatch. I think it's some of the most fun. I love the humor in it. I mean, as always, it doesn't always all land, but for the most part, I think it was a step up from a lot of the Saban-related humor. A lot of it felt more grounded and real and funny and natural. I loved the meta humor on everything. I think this is one of the season's most unmatched on meta humor, which I love. I love the cast. I liked the story. I loved the idea of like the three underdog characters. And The reason I think it ranked ultimately a little bit higher for me than Jungle Fury was because I think it had a more consistent story. Like, I never felt there was ever really any clunky bits that I disliked in it, and it all flowed together pretty nicely in my opinion. Next up might be a bit of a controversial pick for this high up on the list, but is Power Rangers Mystic Force, which I believe to be a very underrated Power Rangers season. This season also gets a lot of heat like Overdrive, although I've seen some come around to it recently, but I really like this season. I mean, people always get on the Mystic Force train, even though there's tons of other seasons that I would argue focus on one character more. I didn't have a problem with them, having a more central figure to it, and I actually really like the cast in this one. I think it was a unique cast with some really standout Rangers. Xander's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, Plan Xander. Enough said. I think this had one of the strongest, if not the strongest, supporting cast of characters that was memorable. I think they did a really good job of transforming Magiranger. Was that Disney style of adaptation where they kind of took the blueprints from the Sentai but then colored it in differently, and Magiranger felt very much more like a magical season, and this was much more of a mystical, almost Mystic Knights feeling season. Like I'm literally just saying the words of the seasons, but if you've watched both of them, you know what I mean. It has a distinct tone, and I like that with the smaller episode count, it felt like the plot moved really nicely on this, and I think it's just a really underrated and enjoyable season, also with a really great score. Next up on the list, coming in for number 3, is Power Rangers SPD, a fan favorite season for many easy reasons. I adore this season as well. A really great cast. I think one of the best core casts of a series. Like, you can really just feel the chemistry between them. A bunch of likable characters. I feel like you got to know them all really well. Again, similar to what I mentioned with Overdrive, but done even better, they took the more episodic nature of Deca Ranger's storyline and managed to tie it into a core narrative about Emperor Grum. I love the style of the series with the comic book panel feel, the score of it. It's just a really solid, really great season, and it's easy to see why it's a fan favorite. Number 2 for me is Power Rangers Dino Thunder. This is an all-time favorite for me. It's in my top 5. I think actually these last 3 picks are all in my top 5 seasons in general. Or at least last time I made the list. It always changes. But I love Dino Thunder. I mean, of course, this season did have the return of Tommy, which was a cool bit, especially back then when we didn't have so many returns every Tuesday, and talk about returns and make fan demands for returns. So back then, this was like a huge, nice surprise, and it was really cool, and I think that was a really awesome part of the season. It's probably my favorite version of Tommy, in the mentor role I think fit really well. A really unique perspective for a mentor, because while we have and will have probably mentors that were some sort of hero before, it was cool to have one that was not only a ranger before, but one that we actually got to experience seeing that, so we know the experience he was drawing from. And then we got cool little lore tie-ins and stuff like, you know, the coolest clip show in Legacy of Power. But all that being said, I still think this would be a high up season for me even without Tommy, because I love their core cast. I really like, it's kind of like a modern MMPR done right. Instead of trying to emulate it and copy it like Neo Saban was doing, I think they updated some of the aspects. They took some of what worked about Ninja Storm for the more modern, more quippy dialogue, more real characters. I love how flawed the core characters are in this, and they're not like, oh guys, I'm gonna go volunteer at charity. It's like, no, Collar. We don't call them collared people. That's offensive. Connor was he's probably one of my more recent favorite Red Rangers. And by recent, I mean I more recently realized, because I like that he was never perfect. They were never like reminding you he was a goody two-shoes. Even as he progressed, as we watch him progress, he never like all of a sudden became this goody two-shoes. And I love how real the characters felt in this. It's just such an enjoyable and different season to watch, with a different villain motivation who didn't want to rule the earth like all the other sickos. Coming in at number 1, being a surprise to no one, is Aaron Stone, Disney XD's coolest original program. No, it's RPM. I love this season. Another fan favorite. Again, it's easy to see why. A lot of people say it's overrated too, and I can see that in certain aspects. I think it's one of those seasons for me where I know it's good and I like it, but I can see when people overhype it why it might be a letdown. But this was a really cool change of pace. You know, it was a little bit darker, which was cool in some aspects. That's not necessarily what I liked about it. I liked that story. Like, the post-apocalypse setting is something that is overdone, I would agree, but it's not something we've seen in PR. It was a huge leap. It was interesting to see that aspect, to see this different world. I love that they referred to them as like Ranger Operator, Ranger Series. I thought that was really neat. Again, I keep mentioning characters, and I think that's something the Disney era got really well done. That was not like a steak. They did a really good job on that, which is why I keep bringing it up. But this cast is also one of my favorite ensembles. And again, similar to SPD, I feel like this is one where I really got to know everybody. So much so that we even had those individual focus episodes. I really liked that feeling of actually getting a little bit time with them more individually outside of a generic focus episode that's mostly filler, and we learned a couple little details about it, and I think it was really neat in that way. And also, very similar to Ninja Storm, it had a ton of meta humor too, so it was this really cool mix where they could tell some more mature stories that were a little bit more in depth, but they also weren't afraid to be funny. I definitely prefer the second half, but I still think it ended pretty decently, and I think is one of the gems of PR, and really shows how far the show had grown since MMPR, which was why the Neo Saban era was so frustrating, because we saw it grow all the way into this, and then we fell all the way back down. That is my list. What is your guys' personal Disney season rankings? Thank you for watching these. It's a lot of fun to make these. As always, it's fun to see the discussions in the comments. I do read all of them, even if I'm kind of bad about replying sometimes. Sometimes if I, you know, forget to check for a couple days and then I read them, I'm like, man, it's been like 2 days. It's awkward to reply now. But anyway, next up is going to be taking a look at the Saban Entertainment era in the best and worst and ranked videos, so look forward to that. Hopefully. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and of course, don't forget to climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for all my videos. Until next time, Dawson Ryder, signing out.